Okay then, let's roll. Good afternoon now, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the very first Further webinar. We're going to be spending 45 minutes or so together today, discovering how to communicate effectively in those most vital of moments. Today's topic, if you don't know already, and you really should, is the art of the difficult conversation. And we've got one of our further experts, the further expert on this topic, with us today to talk about it, share ideas and advice. First of all, who on earth am I? For those people I don't know in this room already, my name is Rich Watts. I guess I'm the founder of Further, but that sounds rather too grand. I'm someone who wants to make sure that everybody has the communication skills that they need to achieve their goals. And that's what today's all about. You don't have to be a Further client and have training and support from us, but we do want you to have the skills to be able to achieve your goals and your dreams. That doesn't sound too fluffy. And that's what we're going to try and give to you a little bit today. Now, the art of difficult conversations. Difficult conversations, I've done my research. Most of us, over 50% of us indeed, have ruminated on a difficult conversation for over 2 weeks. What a waste of energy, focus and effort. As you're listening now, there may be a difficult conversation you have in mind that you are ruminating on at this very point. And whether you have the skills to achieve it or not, it's distracting you from what you need to do. Within organisations, 1 in 3 of us report avoiding difficult conversations that cost the organisation up to around £20,000 because it's just easier not to have those conversations, particularly if it's not our money. And finally, only 1 in 10 of us believes that we have the skills to effectively manage and succeed, and we'll learn more about what succeeding means in a difficult conversation. And that's probably why you're here today. So today, we are going to discover the what, the whys, the wheres, the hows of difficult conversations. And towards the end of the session, we'll have some user-generated questions. Those of you signed up nice and early got the opportunity to submit your questions for our expert, and we'll put some of them to her at the end of the session. But as we go, do add your thoughts, queries, ideas into the chat as well. And you can find that chat using the speech bubble probably in the bottom right of your corner, bottom right-hand corner of your screen, depending on which device you are on. That's enough from me. Our expert today is Faye. Faye is the further expert in difficult conversations. She's got over 20 years experience in this area, working within the NHS, with the NHS, and with, quite frankly, an astounding number of organisations and individuals across the country on this topic. Welcome, Faye.
Thanks, Rich. Really nice to be here. Thanks for that lovely introduction.
Well, you've got a lot to live up to now. We set the bar very high. I hope I haven't made it too difficult. The first question is a little bit more about you, but please share with us why focus in on supporting people to have better difficult conversations. What led you to this point?
Okay. Well, I guess as a leader, so in the NHS, I should say, I was head of learning and development there myself. In the NHS, I was there for about 12 years. I've had other public sector experience in L&D previously, but as a leader, I really recognise the avoidable harm that not having difficult conversations could cause. So whether it was about poor performance or behaviours that needed to change, people avoided having those conversations, and rather they would move people around. So problems just became somebody else's problem and never got dealt with. And actually, as well as not dealing with the problem and the problem festering, that has a wider impact. It results in resentment, I think, from people who see that, who feel that those issues should be challenged, should be dealt with, and that they're not. As a manager and a leader, I also had to have lots of difficult conversations with people, again, whether maybe about performance or behavior, maybe about well-being issues, even restructures and people perhaps losing their jobs for whatever reasons, were really difficult conversations to have. But what was really important for me in all of those conversations was recognizing that there was a human being on the other side of it. And that's what's really important to me. That's what drives me in my work, is to ensure that in the workplace, I believe that everybody has a right to have a positive experience in the workplace. Thinking about all the hours that we put into work, it ought to be a positive experience for us, even when times are challenging, even when things are difficult, even when we need to hear a difficult message. We should be on the receiving end of that humanness, that respect that we all have the right to. And people are unprepared for that. Lots of organizations don't support managers in how to have those conversations effectively, supportively, respectfully. So I do believe that having those honest and well-held conversations can really make a difference for people.
Yeah, it sounds like you've experienced it from both sides, and you've seen there and experienced the negative outcomes of having those difficult conversations. That human perspective, I know you, obviously our group here today will get to know you over the next few minutes. That weaves through everything that you do, and it's part of why I wanted you within the team at Further, because I think it's a really, really important aspect to consider as we talk today. For the rest of the room, keep the word human in your mind, both from your own perspective, your own human feelings, and those human feelings on the other side of the table, at the other side of the screen, perhaps too. Because we so often assume, I feel, people who have difficult conversations well are robots. They're able to do something very process-driven, very robotic, and succeed. But I've invited a lot of the people into this room today, and I think you're not robots in that sense. So human, I think, is a good word to keep in front of your mind. For all of us then, let's start with Faye. What is a difficult conversation? Let's check we're in the right place, talking about the right thing. What does a difficult conversation look, feel, sound like?
And I think what is a difficult conversation to you will be different for all of us. I think a difficult conversation is really something that we perceive to be difficult. And oftentimes people avoid having those conversations. They worry about them excessively. They stay up at night thinking about them. If they do take the plunge and take the courage to have those conversations, when they handle them well, they often find that it was nowhere near as difficult as they thought it was going to be. So that would be the first step, is it's our perception that it's going to be difficult. But often those perceptions come from the fact that perhaps the stakes feel quite high for us. So that might be because there's the potential impact on the relationship that we have with the other person. Perhaps there's strong emotions present for us or for the individual that we're having that conversation with. So emotions like fear, our own fear. How is this going to impact the relationship we have? It might be that we're quite emotionally triggered by the situation that we're involved in. It might be that we're embarrassed about talking about the topic. So, for example, well-being or health issues. Perhaps we don't feel competent or confident to have those conversations. Power dynamics can come into it as well. Often I think it's about our concern about how the other person will react to it. And that's the bit that we can't control. And of course, we have confidence when we can control things. What we can't control is the dynamics of a conversation. We can only control ourselves and what we contribute to that. I think the other thing as well in there is possibly a fear or a concern that we might hurt the other person in some way. And those of us that are very human in our approach to leadership and management really don't want to hurt people. But one of the questions I often ask is, if you were underperforming, if you were behaving poorly, would you be doing it deliberately? Probably not. Would you want somebody to tell you? Absolutely. But you'd want them to tell you in that way that treats you with the respect of the human that you are.
Yeah. Fantastic. A great summary there. I'm hearing that they're difficult because the stakes are high. They're difficult because we feel they're difficult, and they're difficult topics. It's challenged already a perception of my own, and this very individual to me, that difficult conversations are formal conversations necessarily, and conversations that your manager or someone else tells you have to have because they're important. Is this true? Are difficult conversations always in a meeting room, sort of formally?
I think sometimes they are, and sometimes they should be. They should be when there's a serious impact, when we've reached a point that we have a formal process that we need to follow, where we need to be accountable for that conversation. So if we've reached a point where perhaps there's a grievance or a disciplinary, then absolutely we want to be making that formal. We want to have the right support in place to help us with those conversations. But often we can avoid getting to that point by not avoiding the conversation early on. Often things can be nipped in the bud really early, and those can be informal conversations, and they can be really powerful ones. You know, that quiet word in the moment can be really, really powerful, and therefore not necessitate that formal conversation.
Okay, cool. I like it. I like the fact that this is not just about dive into the difficult conversation. There are steps beforehand as well. There are thoughts, there are individual words, those sorts of things. When we get to the difficult conversation, what are the difficult conversations? What are examples, Faye, in your experience of difficult conversations? But also to everyone listening, watching, please add into the chat your examples of difficult conversations. Let's just get a little pile of what this is in different formats and places. And whilst people are typing, Faye, please tell us what are examples you know of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be great to hear what because, as I say, it's personal to you what's difficult to you. But I think there are some typical triggers. So when people's performance is slipping, well-being concerns might be one, misconduct, of course, and we're at that point we are in that formal space. But things like restructures, changes to expectations around role, perhaps pay conversations can be quite difficult. I'd say when there's conflict within a team as well. So this is where we might be bringing more than, this might be not just a one-to-one, but a one-to-many conversation, perhaps DEI issues that we're dealing with. What's coming into the chat?
Oh, we've got lots of, pulling out word clouds here, like poor performance, underperformance, behavioural feedback to someone who's negative and defensive. We've got negotiations in there, which is perhaps another layer as well on top of the difficult conversations. Difficult conversations with line reports, non-line reports and clients in there. Yeah, those are our main examples. I think from my point of view, in my past lives as well, in various roles and different careers, as if I've had many, for me, it's those conversations with people that you like and respect, but you need to tell them that something isn't right or something needs to change. Gives me that butterflies. I can feel it in my stomach coming when I have to have those conversations, which I think leads nicely into the next question for us. Right, what are the signs that a difficult conversation is coming? What might we notice if it's not as blatant as this person has just broken the company code of conduct? What is the sign that this might be about to occur and we need to use our skills?
So I imagine when everybody put those thoughts into the chat box around, what's a difficult conversation for them. When you put yourself in that place of needing to have that conversation, you get a bit of a flutter, don't you? You get a bit of a feeling, you know, I don't want to have this. I noticed Billy wrote in there about having to have upward conversations, perhaps giving upward feedback. So you've got those power dynamics in there. So you might feel that sort of concern. But other things that, you know, if perhaps as a manager that you might be noticing might be things like gossip going on, tension happening between people in your teams, mistakes. So that would be a sort of a performance thing. The ways people are communicating with one another or with you. So perhaps passive aggressive tone of voice, or perhaps in the emails. But I think really we always know, don't we, when it's something we perceive to be difficult, because we feel it palpably, and I think that's a signal for us to prepare.
Okay, to prepare, which is interesting, might lead into something later. But just before we do, there's an interesting point. I think this Billy's kind of raised this in the chat. Again, it's my assumption, and I might not be reflective of the whole room, but difficult conversations aren't always going from manager to team member. The dynamics there. How, Faye, talk to us about the dynamic issue if you need to talk to someone who you feel is more senior to you and have a difficult conversation. What might occur there, and how do you approach that?
So of course there are some power dynamics there that is going to lead to some of the tension, but actually I think the principles around having those conversations remain the same. And I guess the one thing that underpins all of this is about the relationships we build over a period of time. I think it's very difficult to go into any kind of difficult conversation with a person that we don't really know, that we don't really care about, that we haven't created a level of rapport with. So whether it's client, whether it's negotiations, whether it's managers or more senior staff, there's something about the relationships that we build and the rapport that we build that enable us to come from a good starting place.
Okay, nice. And so before we get into the how of we do this, we've looked at the what, and we've talked a bit about the why and some of the impacts it can have. But in your answer there, it's made me question who should be having difficult conversations. Is it always you who should have it, or are there situations where you should be aware that it should be someone else? Are there signals? Should you just do as you're told and have a difficult conversation?
Oh, you mean so if you've been told to have a conversation with somebody that perhaps... Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is a difficult one. How do I feel about that? I think that if you care about the person and you care about the issue, then the likelihood is that you are the right person, because you're going to go into that conversation with that humanness in mind. I think I will probably be asking why me, first of all. You know, what if you've been asked to have that conversation, why do they believe that you're the right person? Do you agree with that? Do you believe that to be true? And do you have the relationship? There is a difficulty, I think, when we're passing on a message organizationally, when we're representing an organization. We have these, you know, professional boundary where we are expected to uphold our organization's values, standards, expectations, which I think can be quite challenging for us if we don't agree with them. So I think we have to manage that first, make sure that we are in a place where we can authentically give the message across, or are we in a position where we challenge the message back first, you know, so that we get to a point where actually the message that we're giving is a comfortable one.
Yeah, brilliant. I love questions. People who know me in this room and elsewhere will know I like to ask questions, and I already feel there's a little sheet we can produce after this session that are questions to ask going into a difficult conversation. So you've got it on video here because this is being recorded. We'll put that together and we'll share that after the seminar with all of Faye's wisdom and some key questions for people in there too. This has been brilliant. I feel like we're identifying what these conversations are, why they're so important, who has to have them, what they can achieve. But we've only got a few minutes together here today, but how? What are the 3 things, Faye, the three practical things people can do to have great, difficult conversations?
Further 3 things that you can do. Okay, what would I say? I would say the first one for me would be about really thinking through what is your intention in having this conversation. So what's my intention? Is my intention to help the person to improve in some way? Am I going in there because I care about the person? I can see that there is something that needs to change, and I want to support them to make that change happen. First of all, I want them to understand why the change is necessary. But secondly, I would like to help them to get there, to be supportive. When my intention is to vent, to let them know that actually I'm really frustrated with this situation, I don't come into that in a supportive in a supportive way at all. I'm more likely to be driven by the emotion rather than getting to the outcome that I wanted to get to. So the first thing for me is checking with my intention. Within that, it's about managing our emotions, regulating ourselves so that we are in that space. And I guess there's something about believing in the person's ability to be able to achieve that, and letting them know that we do believe that they can get to where we need them to be, whatever that might be. So even if it's a well-being conversation that's having an impact in the workplace, our intention should be to support them, to recognize what impact it's having for them, but also perhaps what they think they could change in order to meet our expectations. It might be that we want to change our expectations, having a fuller understanding, but really thinking in about what is our purpose, what is it we're trying to get to, what is our intention.
Okay, so further tip number one, focus on that purpose and intention. I've got a sub question. So you said there might be bad purpose in there, in terms of I'm feeling a bit angry, I'm going to go and get this person. And I can definitely say younger me, first management roles, yeah, they're getting in my way, come on. If I feel like that, if I recognize I've got bad purpose, what should I be doing other than just giving myself a good talking to?
Yeah, I mean, we need to self-regulate, don't we? And sometimes that takes time. So we have to, I guess the first thing there is to acknowledge the emotion that we're feeling. So name it, recognize what are we feeling here? How is it making us feel? Taking the time. Perhaps sometimes it might be about seeking different perspectives as well to help us to put things into perspective. Often when we're annoyed, when we're angry or frustrated, we can lose the perspective, which means we're not going to go in and have a balanced conversation. And a balanced conversation is really important. It's very rare that the issue that we want to talk about is all defining. So we need to have that balance to recognize and put the issue into perspective. So we might need different perspectives to help us to regulate our emotions. We might need time. So it might be, there's a real challenge, I think, between when we talk to people, it should be timely. It's really important that we don't, leave things to fester and then, deal with them a week, 2 weeks after the event. By that stage, if it's a behavioural issue, for example, we validated the behaviour because we haven't said anything. So therefore, it feels like it's okay. So we need to have those conversations as soon as possible, but not at a point where we are emotionally driven. So it might be 10 minutes, it might be 24 hours. I certainly wouldn't leave that type of issue any longer.
Brilliant. I'm hearing time and perspective there to cure a bad purpose. Okay, so your first practical action for us was to reflect on our purpose.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a long pause to give you time to think, but what comes in at number 2? Not that you need it. What comes in at number 2 on your practical tips?
Number 2 for me, I think, is about how much talking we do and how much listening we do. I think it's really important that once we've landed the message, so and there's something about landing that message with clarity and it being respectful and kind, all those things that we talked about earlier, but clear and to the point and balanced. But then I think we need to apply the 70-30 rule, where we're only doing 30% of the talking and 70% of the listening. And this really then takes us into a collaborative space. And you know, if we want to get ownership of the actions that people take, they need to have identified them for themselves as much as possible. So I think listening really helps us to create a space in which we are collaborative in getting to solutions.
My wife, I don't think she can hear me from this room, would say I'm not very good at listening. So both at home and in my professional life, when I do listen more than I talk, what should I do then? Once I've listened, what should I do with what I hear in a difficult conversation?
So for me, the key to really listening, like really, really listening, is to seek to understand. Seek to understand the other person's perspective, what their perspective is. So what do they think? Why do they think that? What's underpinning all of that? To do that, I think we have to suspend our own need to be right. Okay. So if I were to say to you, how often when you're listening to somebody, are you actually listening with a view to what you're going to say next?
Do I have to answer that one?
You don't, but I'd encourage everybody to think about it. You know, when we're communicating, often we are listening for our cue for what we're going to say next, which means we're not really listening. We're not really listening to that person's perspective. This is about our agenda and where we want to get to. So listening is really about suspending our need to be right, listening with curiosity, and probing deeper. So really, you know, asking more questions, listening out for hook words, you know, things that sound like they're important, are words to use that person's own words back at them. And it might be a really open question. So it might be something like, you know, I noticed that you said that makes you feel uncomfortable. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So really using coaching questions.
Brilliant. As I'm listening, it sounds and feels so counterintuitive, particularly in a difficult conversation setting. And I'm contemplating it now, but it feels like the difference between the chimp brain and the human brain, and the lizard brain and the human brain, whichever terminology you want to use, where my instinct is very much to go in there and just tell them how it is and tell. Whereas actually, with a bit of reflection and thought, the listening will lead us to better answers in the longer term, better solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not only about the solutions that we get to, it's also about the person being heard. And when we're heard, we feel valued, and that's bringing back that humanness, I think.
Definitely. And that seems to play into what you said earlier about recognizing that everybody has value, that they are not here to do bad things and to make your life difficult. And so that, yeah, if they recognize their own value, you've got a great foundation, I think, to build from there. And some of us are better at listening than others. I felt like you were making me listen by leaning in and making eye contact, even over the camera there. I was like, oh, I'm engaged. What can we do in the room to be better listeners? Are there any tactics we can employ?
So I think the first thing is to be fully present. So if you're going to have a difficult conversation, you need to remove all of the distractions. Not just, is your phone going to go off? Are you in a private space? All the sort of obvious things that remove those external distractions, but also about the internal distractions. So what are we thinking about? Have we just put down something really important that we were really focused on and we haven't quite finished yet? Have we got to run straight to another meeting as soon as this one's over and we haven't quite prepared for it yet? All of those things take us out of the zone of listening, because believe it or not, none of us can multitask. Not effectively anyway. So in order to really listen and to really hear the person, their perspective, and their desires, their aspirations, where they want to get to, I think we have to be fully present. So making sure, spending 10 minutes before you go in there to make sure that there's nothing else on your mind at the moment, that you've done everything that you need to, so that you can fully focus on the individual. Other things that we can do is really listening into the words that people use and using those same words when we summarize back to people. And the reason for that is that unintentionally, what happens when we're communicating, we decode the words that we hear and we take meaning from it, but we interpret that again using with our own agenda, our own perspective. So when we replay that, if we change the words, in effect we change the meaning. Now often the person on the receiving end will go along with that, and it's close enough. You might have the occasion where they will say, no, that's not what I meant, providing you're giving them the space to. But as far as possible, I try to use the same words that I'm hearing from people, and you have to really pay very close attention to do that. And the third part around listening that I would advise or suggest is to shut up. That sounds horrible, but the power of silence, and anybody who's been involved in recruitment will know that when you ask somebody a question and they give you an answer, if you stay quiet, they will go deeper. They will automatically want to fill that silence, and so the likelihood is that they will go even deeper, and you'll get much richer data out of it. That's my top tips on listening, Rich.
I can't get quiet for any longer than that. I was trying desperately to leave a big pause, but I can't do it. Brilliant. So far, our two things are focus very clearly on your purpose, listen more than you talk. And they sound like very simple things, but you've demonstrated you've got lots of knowledge there on those things and given us some great insight. What's the third practical focus? Does it begin with the letter C by any chance? Because I know that is one of your absolutes. I am leading you. I'm definitely leading you.
I think there is something around compassion. I think that's where you're going, and certainly that's absolutely critical to me, that we are compassionate in our approach to all of those that we're working with, but in particular when we're having those difficult conversations. So when we talk about compassion, what we're really talking about is recognizing what's going on for the other person. So first of all, acknowledge their perspective, whatever that might be, which means we need to listen. So acknowledging, what's their suffering, what's their pain, what's the challenge for them, and empathizing with this. And that's a skill I think we can learn. It's not you're not either empathetic or you're not. You can lean into that space by listening, by understanding what that means for them. So it doesn't mean walking in their shoes and understanding what that would mean if I were in their shoes, because your shoes are different shoes. So it's really about recognizing what pain, discomfort, challenge that is causing for them. That's the empathizing. And then the next, so where compassion moves on from empathy is what we do with it. And for me, it's about taking intelligent action. And intelligent action is about doing the thing that that person needs from you to help them to move forwards, whatever that is. And that's, again, why we need collaborative spaces. We need to listen. We need to ask good questions to help people think further about what they can do about the particular issue. So acknowledging the person's perspective, empathizing, and taking intelligent action from their perspective and supporting them with that is compassion for me.
Amazing. So our further three things are: focus on your purpose, be a great listener, and then go in with compassion, which you've broken down there. Absolutely. And then into intelligent action.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and segue very neatly, because we've got those three practical tips, but we've also asked for audience questions.
Yes.
I've got 3 here. If any of our group members want to pop some into the chat as well, we'll try and get through as many as we can in the next few minutes. Intelligent action is coming to a seminar and asking a question, definitely. The first of which is, and I've had to paraphrase it slightly to protect the identities and avoid any HR issues, I think, on this one. But sure. What is a constructive way to approach a conversation with a direct line report about a topic that I have not witnessed? So I believe the manager in this case hasn't been around to witness this behavior or action, but is the one who needs to have the difficult conversation about it.
Yeah, I have to say, I as a manager, I face that quite often, where my example would be team members coming up to me and saying, Faye, this is an issue, this person's behaving in this way or making these mistakes, but I don't want you to tell them that I told you. And that's because they fear the conversation as much as we do. They want to protect the relationship that they have, which is absolutely understandable. I often would try to encourage people to own the feedback that they gave me, but absolutely we have to respect that people often don't want to do that, particularly within teams. So tips around that, I would say, is to be transparent about that. Don't try to, we need to be authentic in these conversations. So we need honesty. So I might start off by saying something like, this hasn't come from me directly, but I would like to understand what's happening. So I've had feedback that suggests X, Y, Z, whatever that means. So what I'm saying is, this is what I have heard, and I would like now to hear your perspective on that. So we're not making any assumptions with that. So that would be my starting point, and then I would invite reflection from them. So we're opening up that collaborative space. So how do you see the issue? Would you like to tell me a bit more about that? So what we really want to focus on is curiosity, understanding, whilst also setting expectations. So being really clear about, whilst I'm not here, this is how I expect people to behave. That shouldn't be any different to when I am here. So we want to avoid accusations as well. Quite often when you do that message, and I imagine the person who sent this message in is thinking, I'm making an assumption, but I can imagine they're thinking, but they're going to ask me who told them, who said that. So for me, I would say it really doesn't matter who said it. The person told me because it was important to them. It's having an impact either for you, for the team, and that's what I would like to work with you to address, because what I really want is for you to succeed here. So we're about the purpose. What are we trying to get to? Maintaining our focus on what outcome do we want to achieve, and recognizing that our intention and the intention as a person that provided that feedback is a positive one.
Brilliant. Thank you. Second question then that has come in is about, again, trying to paraphrase it ever so slightly, but I've had a difficult conversation with a team member about a topic that the rest of the team are aware of, and now that team member has to go back out into the office and change their behaviour, act differently. How do I support that team member after the difficult conversation? Because it's, from what I can pertain from this question, it's a bit of an open secret that this difficult conversation's taken place about their behaviour or their conduct. So how do I support them after the difficult conversation?
So, and I think, you know, even with any difficult conversation, what we want to do is check in with people afterwards. You know, later on, it might be that, you know, as a performance conversation, we're likely to set goals and targets to achieve. We'll put milestones along the way and we'll check in against those milestones. But other issues that we're talking about as well, whether formally or informally, we can always check in, you know, to say, encouraging people in terms of what we've witnessed. So what has changed? What have we noticed? Is there room for further development of the issue? So I think positive feedback on what we've witnessed, what changes we've seen, continued support, and checking in what support do you need. I think there's always an issue around confidentiality, in that, yes, the team might know about it, but you have a responsibility to maintain that person's confidentiality. So even though it might be an open secret, we don't talk about it to anybody. If people come to us and say, have you dealt with it? Yes, I've dealt with it, and we're making progress, is as much as we need to say, I think. And I guess the other thing, coming back to intelligent action, might be to recognize that with the person. So to say to the individual, the team are aware of this, how do you want to deal with that?
Nice.
Yeah,
I love that.
To identify what works for them.
I love that. I haven't got a pen close enough to me, but luckily we're recording this, so that one's going on the rich list. And then finally, what is the best way to end a difficult conversation on a positive note?
Okay, yeah. Hopefully, if we've landed the message right at the start with clarity and balance, we've kept it in perspective, our purpose has been positive, intentional, and helpful, and then we've got moved into a collaborative space around intelligent action, hopefully we're going to be in a relatively positive space anyway. That said, and we haven't talked about the other person's emotions, that might be something for another day. You know, likelihood is that person will have had a negative emotional reaction to the message. That it might be that they're relieved. Actually, sometimes people are relieved that they've heard the message, or that somebody else knows, and now they've got the support that they needed and didn't want to ask for. But oftentimes the emotion on the other side of it can be quite negative. I guess what we're seeking to gain from that is that we leave that space with everybody knowing what they need to do and that they've got the support to do it. So being supported is that humanness, that compassionate piece. So to end, I would say what we need to do is summarize what the key takeaways are, so that everybody is clear and we're checking understanding there. So we're making sure that we're both on the same page. So if I summarize back, so I might say, these are the things that I believe we've agreed to. Are you happy with those? Is there anything else that you need from me in terms of support? I think I mentioned earlier, but one of the things I think is really important is believing yourself that that person has got the capacity to make the change they need to change, whatever that is, and acknowledging that to them, letting them know that you do believe that they've got that potential. I think there's the being really clear about when we will check in about this again. So let's check in about, in 2 weeks' time, whatever it feels appropriate to the situation. And then finally, I think it's good to really connect with people, to thank them for engaging with the conversation. Even though there might have been some tricky moments that you've had to manage, thanking that person for when you get to the point that they have engaged with it, recognizing that that hasn't been easy for them, but we're moving forwards positively, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm aware of the time, and I'm now going to try and conclude and summarize what we've talked about today. But there's so much in there, Faye. Thank you so much. So many different thoughts, perspectives that we can employ when we come to having difficult conversations, lots of ideas. So rather than try and summarize everything, I'll talk to you about what will happen next. We will make sure that you get a good summary, you get the key highlights, the takeaways from today's chat sent to you. We'll make sure those are really easy and accessible. I'm thinking lovely PDF, as well as recording of the webinar for you to rewatch and skip to your favorite bits if you'd like to do that. Do please check out the Further Communications LinkedIn page, because we will post some nifty little social media graphics with key takeaways from today there as well, that you can share around your team. Make sure everybody's great at difficult conversations. And whilst Faye, and due to the limitations in some ways of the internet, has talked only about the art of difficult conversations, she of course does run a full day training session for the Further clients and customers on, well, the science, more the practicalities of difficult conversations. So some real frameworks and opportunities for you to practice in a safe space so that you can have better difficult conversations. So please do contact us if that is of interest to you. And of course, you'll have our details after this webinar. I think it just remains, as Faye highlighted, in a great difficult conversation and in a great happy webinar, to finish by thanking the other person for their participation and being here today. So thank you, Faye.
It's been my
thank you. Brilliant. I didn't do this smoothly, did I? And thank you to everybody else who has joined us as well today. It's been wonderful to see you here for the first webinar. We'll keep you posted on all the amazing topics we have to come in the months and years ahead. Thank you and goodbye.